This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and eventually Stalin Tim Dahl, who's a little late to the intro, but here I am. Maybe he got swept away in that derecho. A derecho, which is a Spanish term for kind of a flat tornado. It usually happens in the Spanish mountains. It swept through the Midwest, including Chicago, this week, and left 1.5 million people without power. Now, the Northeast is still suffering from the effects last week of that cyclone. And I think people in Connecticut, there's still about 500,000 people without power here. At one point, it was 16 days in a row where the heat index was over 100 degrees and humidity. Don't even talk to me about it because my ass will start screaming. The National Science News 2020 said that this is going to be one of the most active Atlantic hurricane seasons possibly on record, with a probability of 25 major storms, twice as many as usual, and half of them will probably be devastating. Could that be because the ocean temperatures are rising and everything the Cheeto King has done while he's been in office is to devastate more of nature, get rid of environmental protection, and suck the cocks of fossil fuel ingrates. And I love wind, by the way. I lived in New Orleans for a few years. However, extremely devastating. And to think of a derecho through the Midwest, absolutely unheard of, which is like a flat tornado, 250 miles long. Outrageous. Good luck quarantining when your roof's been blown off. Not easy to do. Let's just put it that way. When did school start in the middle of August, I have to ask? I guess because they were out in spring. I'm a bit concerned. Well, being a high school dropout, I don't know why. I don't know anybody who's got school-age children. And if I do, I don't talk to them. But the rate of infection in school-age kids in the last 2 weeks has gone up 90%. And by some estimates now, school-age, there's 380,000 infections in kids that are supposed to start going back to school. Try keeping a mask on a 5 or an 8-year-old. I mean, I guess it's going to be burqas for all my friends, probably steel cages around their heads. I don't know what's going to happen with this. And again, the kids might not die. Teachers are writing their own obituaries in advance. A few weeks ago, teachers staged a protest in New York City with coffins and guillotines and skeletons and body bags because they are frightened. And a lot of teachers are just resigning. There is no cohesive plan. What's amazing to me is that New York got it under control. A place like New York City can get it under control. As a matter of fact, in my neighborhood, 0 COVID infections. And you can get your Citizens app for your phone. It not only tells you the crime in your neighborhood, which of course is rising. Murders are up 57%. But I'll tell you where the COVID is so you can avoid it. And the way you can avoid it is by ordering a Lydia lunch mask at kungfu.com. We still have masks because we're going to be wearing them forever, so you might as well get one with my logo on it. I'm just saying, they're pretty cute. Back to the high school skateboarder. I'm just saying, that's when somebody just has an idea and they decide to go for it, and they actually succeed, doing better than all the idiots in charge that are preventing the possibility of getting rid of the main problem. Well, the main problem we have is in the White House, but out from him, that main virus spreads, the pandemic. And we now have Stalin Tim Dahl. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
All right, so Tim, I know that you're interested in this. This is one of my favorite things I saw this week because I've got to get some happy time in here. It's Shark Week. First, let me just say that again because I love saying it. It's Shark Week. In my house, it's always Shark Week. I love sharks. You love sharks. You love scuba diving. Mike Tyson tickling the snout of a shark, causing, sometimes I tickle men and they also go into what's called tonic immobility. So if you can get your hand onto the snout of a shark.
A tiger shark specifically, I assume, right?
Yeah. But anyway, if you can tickle the snout of a shark, it goes into tonic immobility. And you can also get a shark vertical, and then it doesn't move. Tonic immobility usually caused when a shark is in its usual position, but it's something that happens with female sharks when they go into mating. Now, it's part of the other animals, it's like fight or flight, okay? For instance, deer in the headlights, deer and a cougar. Deer freezes, plays possum. It's something that also happens in humans. This is why sometimes people that have had extreme trauma or even rape victims, they kind of freeze. They freeze. The unfortunate thing is with animals, not so much sharks, all other animals, they that have the fight or flight and get into the frozen zone. As soon as the trauma passes or the predator passes, they have a full body shakeout, eliminating the trauma. And I've discussed this before with you, Tim. This is why I think that people that have been traumatized as children can become sex addicts, because they're looking for the ultimate orgasm that animals have every time they've been in a dangerous situation. The full body orgasm shakes out the trauma, it's gone. People that have been victims of childhood trauma are looking for the ultimate orgasm, the ultimate shakeout to get rid of the trauma. Now let's get back to sharks.
Yeah, well, so there's thousands of species of sharks. Most of them, right before they attack, or if they feel threatened, like cats, they arch their back. Different animals have these like body languages. With sharks, they kind of arch their backs too before they're about to attack you. Again, there's thousands of species of sharks, and some of which have been around before the last dinosaur.
Millions.
The last dinosaur extinction. And they're discovering new ones all the time that are very deep in the water. Now, Shark Week is the classic that from Discovery Channel. This year, and they probably did it last year, National Geographic tried to cock-block Discovery by having Shark Fest. and Shark Fest is a distant second to Shark Week.
Can we have Shark Feast?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was watching a little bit of Shark Week today, because I had a feeling we were going to talk about it. And they definitely try to instigate the feast through these things called chumsicles. And they basically take these giant chunks of fat and meat and they freeze it in this giant block, and they throw it in the water just to get the... Discovery has been interesting. So they had Mike Tyson. Last year they had Shaquille O'Neal.
They're also having Will Smith and various other people going down to tickle sharks.
There's a thing, maybe like black people with horror movies, black people with sharks, it's like they kind of want to exploit maybe that, because it seems to be the demographic of the celebrity they tend to bring on.
Mike Tyson said he was so scared. This is why I do like Mike Tyson. He is like a little boy in a monster's body. He was so scared he vomited before he went down. Oh, poor Mikey. Is that why he chews people's ears off? Because he's not going to... A bit of ear and a bit of Pepto-Bismol goes down easy.
So Tyson's like a feral human being, and he had to deal with molestation and abuse, and this story's kind of tragic. Unfortunately, some other people got hurt along the way.
There's something very childlike about him. And whatever his faults and his crimes, and I'm not praising him for anything other than being a well-trained killer coming up against my favorite kind of killer, a shark, tickling its snout, and all is love. This week, I'm going to keep it a little bit lighter, because that's just what I'm doing, because I think people are having COVID fatigue. And
people are upset.
Look, I'm paid to be upset. I'm not getting paid to do this podcast. But anyway, if you want to give me a few pennies or not, you can always go to my Bandcamp. I don't really care. You can listen to all that shit for free. Lots of spoken word in case this intro isn't long enough.
I want to say a little more about sharks. Not only is it Shark Week, it's been like a shark summer. There was a death. It's the only thing that I always kind of feel a little bummed out about is when we go on our tours to Australia. And because you can't scuba dive and fly in the same day, and we're doing all one-nighters flying all the time, I never can do, well, this time we were in Adelaide, the cage diving great white shark adventure. And I'm like, what?
And all you got instead was to pet a koala.
Well, that was cute and adorable, I guess, for some people.
Tim, I think somewhere in you, maybe it's the fluffiness of your fine, beautiful locks. You have a little koala in you, or was that just from was that just from rubbing up against the koala? But I guess you have quite a bit of shark in you too, which is why we get along. Let me tell you what I've been entertaining myself with, because we don't have much time right now. So I just want to recommend a few things, and they're not all new. Some of them are older, but these are some of my top viewing and reading materials that might be able to just, as we suffer from COVID fatigue. I love quarantine, but that's all right. Aubrey Plaza. Who doesn't love that sarcastic little strumpet? Really great show called Legion. It's on Hulu. It's not that new, but there's 2 or 3 seasons. Most psychedelic, weird, insane asylum, our super psychic powers, insanity is a viral infection. Some of the best art direction. I'm just saying Legion, Aubrey Plaza, Hulu, check it out. Now, on Netflix, who doesn't have it? I know it's the cheapest thing out there. Of course, Mindhunter 1 and 2. Mindhunter, it's not new, but it bears watching again, and it's based on the original person in the FBI that devised profiling, serial killing profiling. And I have to say that the second season, which begins with one of the creepiest songs I've ever heard, I had to play it 100 times the other night. In every dream house, a heartache. Roxy Music, I'm just saying. Ozark was great. Money laundering, drug dealing in the Ozarks. Bloodline, these are all on Netflix. Fear City, about the mafia and New York crime in the early 70s. How to Fix a Drug Scandal. If you want to laugh, Dave Chappelle, of course. Maria Bamford, wherever you can find her. Black Mirror, just if you don't feel like you're paranoid enough. And I really want to recommend it. It was beautifully done, and it's not quite based on the book, but it is The Haunting of Hill House, which is based on a Shirley Jackson book. And Shirley Jackson was an American horror writer she died in 1965, kind of in the same vein as a Sylvia Plath or an Anne Sexton, but of horror, but still traumatized and weird. There was also a black and white film in the late 60s, early 70s. But The Haunting of Hill House, the series on Netflix, is shot beautifully, just about a house that is a creep. There's also a movie called Shirley, which Elizabeth Moss stars in, which I hear is really fantastic, about the troubled life of Shirley Jackson when she died in 1965. Who's claiming that you're a witch in 1965? I mean, if you're alive, you might claim you're a witch. If you're dead, give me a break. Also, Amazon, if you want to know what really quarantine feels like, The Lighthouse, with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson in a lighthouse.
I wanted to see that.
In total quarantine, drinking themselves into oblivion. I'm sure it'll make you feel better. Weasel recommends Cathoid TV on Twitch, which I guess is curated by different people. It's free, and they have all kinds of strange movies. And I just want to rattle off a few books, as we've got like 2 minutes here. Anything by Mike Davis, including Dead Cities, Planet of Slums, LA and the Ecology of Fear. Now, if you want to go into the mind of madness and the theater of cruelty, Antonin Artaud anthology, trust me, I've quoted him aplenty. Henry Miller, Tropic of Capricorn, one of the most insane, sexy, stream of conscious books ever written. I'll go into that some other time when I tell you about the upcoming Grid collaboration. Not now, don't have time. Craig Clevenger, Demophoria, Contortionist Handbook, both books about like chronic lying and drug abuse and insanity, and just a few articles that this week have come out that I have to say have made me kind of happy. And one is called The Raving of Mad King Trump by Richard North Patterson, and that's at The Bulwark. And this is just a fantastic article. Along with everything else, Donald Trump is a total pig. I might read that article in the next intro. I don't have time today. That just came out this week. And then McSweeney's.net has, lest we forget the horrors, a catalog of Trump's worst cruelties, collusions, corruptions, and crimes. And of course, for music, well, that brings us up to this episode, The Last Poets. Now, Tim, any closing words?
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it next week because Kamala Harris was just announced to be the VP running mate of Joe Biden, and a mass incarceration, mass cop, a black woman. So it's a little cynical. And
well, maybe she'll turn the cheek and start incarcerating mad cops.
Maybe. And I guess the other things in the news is the Chicago riots. The looting's been going on for a couple of days. They're trying to contain that. I don't know where that's going. It's kind of...
I talked about the derecho, that after the looting came the storm. All right, well, look, we'll be back on all of this.
Oh, yes, definitely.
As we always are. Just in case you didn't have enough of my smoking and spoken word, go to my Bandcamp. A lot of it's free. You can pay me $1 if you want. I don't really care. I don't need your money. Actually, I'm looking for a corporate sponsor. All right, this is Lydia and Span with Tim Dahl, and coming up is Babatunde of The Last Poets. This is Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. This is the Lydia and Spin. And I am very excited to have I'm going to say Papa because I think of him as my big Papa. Baba Don Babatunde, Last Poets, and many other accomplishments, which we are going to discuss and describe as we go along. Thank you very much for being with us, Baba.
Hey, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
You don't mind if I call you Papa?
I like Baba Don Babatunde. I like that.
How do you normally say your name?
Baba Don Babatunde.
You go by a few of them, though.
I like that.
I know you love it when I call you Big Papa, and let's face it, it fits the bill now. You're up in Harlem.
I'm in Harlem.
Were you born in Harlem?
Born and raised. Yep.
How's Harlem doing in these days of the great COVID quarantine?
Well, Harlem is struggling. As far as businesses are concerned, it's struggling quite a bit. But, there people are resilient and they're making things work. We have a lot of restaurants, mostly it's the restaurants and stuff to the outdoor things, So, like most of Manhattan, the same.
I think Manhattan might be having parts of it worse than anywhere else just because, of the type of economy they have in places in Manhattan.
As far as the arts and performing and Lincoln Center and all the people who work behind the scenes, that is a devastation.
It's quite a disaster.
And performance arts are at the end of the line in terms of getting back to any kind of normality. And if you're touring, forget it. I mean, although I heard through the grapevine, I'm not going to throw people under the bus here, an anonymous person flew into London. This person flew in. They didn't quarantine him. The next day, he gets on the Star train to Paris. No one stopped him. I got into Europe like, whoa. I mean, I wouldn't risk that with the money and all that stuff, but not as tight as you would think with this.
It's crazy. I just don't understand how people are just being so naive or just, what is it about the mask? I mean, what's the big deal?
It's been politicized, and it's the same with global warming and all that stuff. There's science and there's politics, and if you're ignoring the science. And
we all know the Cheeto in charge is a fucking idiot, but he's so dumb he couldn't even monetize his own masks. He could have been making millions. I made masks with my logo. He couldn't even monetize his masks.
Kushner, basically, when this shit started hitting the fan here in the Northeast, when we got hit hard, their calculation was, let's put all the blame on the governors because they're all blue states because it's not going to affect us. Well, here it comes, red states. You're getting affected, and Florida's numbers are going.
And it's closing in on Trump. It's like Herman Cain at the Tulsa rally. The Secret Service agents, like one of his son's girlfriends. Every day, it just becomes more and more outrageous because that someone this ignorant.
It's beyond ignorance. It's
beyond.
Well, the thing is, I was saying the other day, it's like, okay, we dealt with the idiocy. I'm only going back a short time. Dealt with the idiocy of Reagan, which is when I started to become political. Then we had the corruption of Clinton. I'm just going briefly. So now we have someone that's as dumb as Reagan and as corrupt as Clinton, and that just causes global disaster. And we got to get out of this situation. Now, I think it's interesting that the last Poets album was called Transcending Toxic Times, and that was before the COVID came down.
Right.
Always ahead of the game, aren't you?
We were talking about transcending. I came up with that title. And Jalaluddin Takuma came up with Toxic Times. So I said, well, this is Transcending Toxic Times. So that's how
was Jalaluddin on that album?
Yes, he is.
Oh, so what a great bass player.
Like a lot was we did in the studio, but some of the stuff that we would do on performance, in Europe with the band. But we had the band. So then, when Jalaluddin was traveling with us with 3D Family, that's when. So based on that is where we came up with that kind of stuff.
What's so great to me is that Last Poets are again, very active. Like you had an album just 1 year before that, which was Understanding What Black Is. And that was a different flavor. I mean, that was more of a world kind of flavor, reggae in it. It had a lot, and also more musicians. And the new album, new because it's the last one that you did, and it's only not even a year old, is kind of more back to the basic Last Poet.
Toxic Times actually was recorded a while back before, and there was some discrepancies as to why it did come out earlier, but almost like 7, 8, 9 years ago, so it was, and at that time it was going to call it transcend, this stuff comes out, and we said, well, let's put it out, let's put the stuff out, and that's how it came out.
When you're dealing with, as we do, universal issues, chronic issues of injustice, of imbalance, of prejudice. It's never go away. This is not of a certain time. It's that we're becoming, the time now, we are becoming more aware. And Black Lives Matter, I mean, these protests have been kind of amazing to see the variety of people, the amount of people. Now, will anything change? I mean, and the thing is, you and I are old enough to have lived through the riots of the 60s. These are different. This is something really different about this.
There's a universal thing that's happening with this. It's global, really, that's what's interesting. You have the far right infiltrating. They're being labeled as Antifa, and Antifa being a far left group. And so, I mean, it's crazy. And, you know, you have documented the people who have been tearing up stuff, you know, who have been instigating that. So they'll tear up a bomb.
Plants you're talking about. You're talking about plants.
Well, or instance, again, I mean, whenever it's the far right or whenever it's white supremacist or whenever it's like this umbrella man who was known to be a white supremacist Hell's Angel, not all Hell's Angels are white supremacist. There are these people that might not be affiliated. They might be solo antagonist, they might be affiliated with something, and then that's what's going to get the attention. Now, I have to say, what really impressed me in the last 2 weeks, besides the fact in Portland, they're not stopping. Portland, where are all these white people coming from? Thank you very much for getting out in the streets. But, okay, we have that going on. Then we have the wall of moms, the wall of dads, the wall of grandpas and grandmas, the wall of pizza makers, but best of all, the wall of leaf blowers. And to me, that's just genius.
I think the Marxism that they're talking about is just a Trump. It's not working.
We'll see where that goes. I mean, a lot of funny business could come into play, as it already is, clearly.
Well, I mean, we're about to go to war with China. It looks like, you know, I mean, he's going to have a war somewhere.
First he's sucking their dick, then he's kicking them in the ass. I don't get this guy. Make up your mind. You either love him or you hate him. And why are they called dictators? The only ones he's interested in are his daddy figures. Because his father, we all know, was arrested at a Ku Klux Klan rally in 1926-27. He's just looking for daddy again.
Right.
Thank you, Mary Trump, for writing that book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, interesting because with that book, I've skimmed through it a little bit. He is such a moron. You almost, I don't want to say how you do because I don't. You almost feel bad for him. He got in so over his head, and then Republicans it's like some bad stage moms pushing this like 5-year-old up on a beauty pageant. Like the Republicans are like, go up there and do this so we can do our dirty work. And he is so in over his head, and he's such an egomaniac, narcissist nutcase that he just keeps on going. It's just unbelievable.
What's amazing in this day and age, and how tragic it is that John Lewis dies now, one of the people that just his whole life protested against this kind of ignorance. And of course, I'm not even going to talk about the disrespect that idiot, I mean, that's just so disrespectful. Here we are. Let's bring it more insular. Great art has always happened before a war, after a war. To me, it's always, as an apocalyptic, it's always times of war. It's just, where is that war and how much do we know about it? You know, the war never ends. This is why I first started speaking about politics. And of course, inspired by the last poets and inspired by just the situation I grew up in. Now, how old were you when you took to music as not only a rebellion, but a salvation to the soul of the individual that knows there's something outside of this wickedness?
Because we grew up with all this going on, you know, that's in the 60s and the riots and the injustices, Martin Luther King dying, getting assassinated. You know, all of this, I'm growing up with all of this, Malcolm X, all of that was in my time. So my mother and my father, they were pretty involved in politics and in the Black Arts movement. At that time, I come to find out later in life that Dr. Ben was a good personal friend of the family. And, you know, it was a funny thing because I'm saying, like, wow, I wanted to get to meet Dr. Ben. I already had met Dr. Ben, but I didn't know it. I was a little kid. And they would come to my house and he would have these conversations and all this stuff, but I didn't know nothing about that. You know, I'm a little baby. It was all in my subconscious. But, you know, I'm looking at Dr. Ben and, you know, genuflecting and all of that stuff. And I come to find out, oh, yeah, your father. I know your father. Well, I know you was a little baby, blah, 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 blah. I said, I wish my dad told me sooner. But, you know, this is kind of stuff when you're growing up, you get older, you don't, you know, they take it for granted. And it's like, what? You know Dr. Ben? Yeah, I could have went to Egypt with him, you know, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I grew up with that. So that was kind of unofficial background. And then the last poets came out. I think that was through my mom, because she put the group called Blackfrica, which has now segued into Harlem Week. It's kind of moved into that kind of production. She was like one of the founding members of that. Before it was Harlem Week,
And what was it? What was their original goal when she was founding this, and what year was that?
Oh, don't ask me the year. Well, I was in like
60s?
60s, 68, 70s on there. I guess it was about the black arts. It was about revolution will not be televised. That was the mode. So that's when I got the album, and
And how old are you? You must have you were just a child. Because Last Poets, they're celebrating their 50th year, last year.
I was about 12. We were like 9 years apart, so that's where it comes from.
You're just my age. You're just a baby still.
Amen.
Well, we look and act like babies sometimes. I'm not sure.
Sometimes we're like, "Woo, look at you." But yeah, I was about 12, and so that's where I got my initiation into the music, Osabisa, and all those groups at that time, and the African music and culture. For me, it was about expanding my understanding of African culture beyond the music, also into the religious practices. It had to be something before Christianity. I mean, Christianity
absolutely.
There's lots of things.
Cannot be the be all in all to life as we know it. And so that was my goal to find. And Islam I wasn't really feeling Islam. So for me, it was I got involved with the Yoruba culture, Afro-Cuban, but that was with Olatunji. It was like I was drawn into the culture of that movement.
And that when you started playing music then, how old were you when you got your first percussive song?
Around the same time, around that time, Yep, that's when I started thinking I could have a band, and then my band fired me. And then I took lessons. I said I was determined, and doing that, I went to a place called Dance Theater of Harlem, which unbeknownst to me was trying to mimic or recreate not only a ballet company, which is famous for, but also they wanted to do like arts community programs. And in fact, it started from the Harlem School of the Arts.
And you went there as a kid?
No. It's funny. These was like venues that I didn't know anything about. I found out about Dance Theater Harlem not because of dance, it was because they had a percussion class. So I was through a priest that was in the after school program, not like after church program on Sunday. We had a youth group. They would bring the drums. Sometimes he had a drummer come in, and Danny Bahanos was the featured drummer. And I was amazed by that. And then, I'm thinking I could play, and I'm banging and stuff. And long story short, one of the priests there turned me on to the school. And from there, that's why I started taking lessons and going to Jasmine and following these guys, being a pain in the ass for the most part, knocking on their doors. Like, who's that? What?
Let me in.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I'm visiting. Ding dong, ding dong.
Hey, ready to go. Did you start taking lessons before you had your own instruments? Did you know you wanted to do percussion and all forms of that because of what inspired you?
My thing was art, as you could see earlier. My art and drums.
Visual art.
Yeah. Visual art's a major factor because I loved to draw when I was a kid. That was probably my best thing. My father had a hand for drawing. So I got that definitely from him. That was really where my goal was going, directing to all of a sudden I was playing drums and I was getting paid maybe $15, $20.
Which, face it, back in those days, that was like $100.
I'm getting paid to play and having some fun. That was it for me. But the thing about it was I wanted to play the trumpet, which I never really took. I wanted to play trumpet. My dad bought me a toy trumpet.
Was it Miles? What turned you on to the trumpet?
I like the trumpet. One with the valves and everything. But he bought a toy, and I looked at it like, this is not this is not happening. So I put it away. I just went to the bongos. They got me some bongos. That was it for me.
That's a nice trumpet to bongos.
Well, a toy trumpet to real bongos.
It's a real bongos, exactly. I never forgot. It was like, I was so disappointed. I was like, oh, man. My whole dream was to play this trumpet. Now, I could have went to trumpet down as long as I've been living here, but I never really, the percussion just took me to another place.
You start playing, you're playing in school, and you start actually getting paying gigs then.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But mostly dance classes? I mean, for a hand percussionist, that seems like the...
Dance classes galore. In fact, the name of my band was called Basic Black. And we performed for my mother's group organization. It wasn't really, the organization she was a part of. That was our first gig. It was nice. We did, we did what we had to do, and we had dreams and hopes and all those things.
Well, look, you went on to fulfill a lot of those dreams and hopes because you've played with so many dance groups professionally then.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, unbelievably. I mean, it's just, I'm looking at the list here. I mean, from Alvin Ailey, Dance Theater of Harlem, Gregory Hines, Harlem Spiritual Ensemble. The list goes on and on. You applied that dream into manifesting a reality.
That was another thing, too. I believe in that. So I believe if you can dream it, you can achieve it. So I think my grandmother taught me that. So you can, whatever man conceives can be achieved. I just took it to the next level.
You might not know about how I manifested us meeting, so I'm just going to cut in and tell you a little story about this. I had an idea. This is maybe 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. I was out at UCLA pitching some concepts to them. They weren't getting anything. And just off the top of my head, I said, no wave out. I said, no wave, out jazz, last poets. I didn't even know at that point if there were any last poets left. It just went over their head. They said, why don't you come to school and talk to kids in the cafeteria? I'm like, I'll get back to you on that. 2 days later, I'm back in New York. I'm going to my friend's house where I'm staying because I was a nomad then. I'm in a taxi. I said, okay, drop me off here. Last minute, I changed my mind. I said, let me off here. I'm going to this cafe. I need to get something to eat. I go in there. There's nobody in there but one man and a child. I go outside. Black man comes out and goes, you're Lydia. I'm like, yes. And he goes, I used to see all your bands, blah, 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 Eight-Eyed Spy Queen, blah, blah. I'm like, how'd you see that? Because he was an engineer in New York at the time, now teaching Phil Painson. And I'm like, how do you even know who I am? So he goes, what do you do? Now, how can I tell him all the things I'm doing? I just thought I would tell him what I want to do. I said, well, I have this idea called No Wave Out. No Wave, Out Jazz, Last Poets. He goes, Last Poets? I've got 2 unreleased albums. This is 2 days after the idea came into my head. and he goes, I know how to get a hold of Umar bin Hassan. I'm like, what? I'm like, do it. So now this is taking a while, okay? We know Umar, and you know what? Look, what is he going to know about me? So finally the meeting is set. It takes some while, and it's a snowstorm. It's a blizzard, but we're going to meet. I'm like, how am I going to convince Umar bin Hassan? I hope he's never seen anything I did. I don't want him to see my music. My spoken word might be too hysterical. God hopes he doesn't see any of my early films. I'm like, how am I going to convince him to understand what I am? We're having a dinner with Phil. First of all, we're drinking the same thing, pimp juice, Hennessy. And then I ask him, I'm like, because, who's this? He probably thought I was like some 20-year-old rock chick, right? Well, who is this? I don't know what he vetted. So I'm like, all right, we're drinking the pimp juice. And I just asked him in the middle of something. He goes, I've been married 3 times. I have 5 kids. I said, well, you did that backwards, didn't you? Because I guess I did. And I said, have you ever been with a white woman? And he said, no, I haven't. I said, well, don't think you're going to be with one tonight, because if you knew what I was, I'm Biggie motherfucking Smalls. He laughed. He got me. And that's, my friend, how we came together. First of all, Umar and I, master poet of the Last Poets, went into the studio in conversation, just him and I, and comparing kind of, because we have some parallels, but still, he's got to be checking me out. Then eventually we just go into the studio to see if we could do something. And that was that amazing with Tim Dahl, with Weasel Walter, you, me, and Umar. And we're just going back and forth. And then actually my dream came to happen, which was the highlight of my life, truly the highlight of my career and art, is to perform alongside you, Tim Dahl, Weasel. We got the No Wave, we got the Last Poets, Sean Kelly, Upriser. And me and Umar going back and forth, No Wave Out, there's some stuff online. And I have to say, that's how you sometimes manifest.
Exactly, yeah.
And let's face it, we did have a good time.
Oh, yeah. Great. We're going to do it again.
Trust me, I'm dying to do it again.
COVID.
Well, trust me, I talk about it as much as I can. And then we met up again in Berlin because I was doing stuff with Weasel Walter, Brutal Measures, and the Last Poets were there. I have to say, we have a good time together. All right, you're doing all this dance theater stuff. Now, when you're doing that, is that live percussion with all of these dance companies, or?
Well, it started with the Chuck Davis Dance Company. Oh, no, actually, Marie Brooks was the first company that I worked with. Because she was,
and when was this about? What year is this?
Oh, 73. Anyway, I was a little baby. You can't really beat it. You see the girls in tights. And you play drums. Come on. But, and you get paid. And you get paid.
Okay. So you're doing all these dance classes. You're doing all these performances. And I mean, your recording credits are pretty vast and wide.
Yeah, I got lucky with a couple of situations that I recorded with. You know, a lot of stuff was like with independent people, but you know.
What about Joe Henderson? What recording was that?
That was with Don Brown.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, cool.
That was a nice setting.
Which album is that?
Oh, I don't remember the album name now. He didn't really reproduce it.
Mid 70s?
78,
80s?
80.
Okay.
But are you still going to school at this point when you're getting these early gigs?
I'm going to school at the time, yeah. Well, this is 78, so around that time, yeah. I'm trying to keep track of time, but like during that time I was in high school
and you're manifesting. You're in high school and you're manifesting.
Yes, indeed. More so than, that was another part of my spiritual concept, that was experimenting on. So in terms of learning learning what that was or how to do it, or how to manifest.
How to put energy out. The energy out you want to come back, because if you don't put it out, what is going to knock on your door? You do put something out, things do come back. It's that
no question about
simple.
it. No question about it. Creative visualization was all part of. I mastered that. I could visualize almost anything I want.
I hope you do, baby. I hope. Yeah. I don't. I mean, now you can see me, but when the screen goes blank, I do hope I am in your dreams. Saying.
Hey, what did you record with George Clinton? What was that?
George Clinton, that's all with Last Poets. That we did some stuff.
Oh, okay.
Oh, a lot of stuff with George. This is with Bill Laswell. When you're in the studio with him, you never know who's coming in the studio. Anywhere else coming in the studio, there was like anybody can come in.
Is this late 80s, early 90s mostly?
This is 90s.
90s,
I got to meet them around 1991 or 1990.
So when all the material and Praxis and all those records were coming out, real eclectic mix.
When did you get into playing with the Last Poets? Because you're doing all this other stuff. You're doing this dance.
1990.
So you're the newbie.
I'm the newbie. Yeah, in fact, a friend of mine who was working with Umar, Jalal. See, here's a funny thing. Prior to that, before that, we had a percussion ensemble at the Dance Theater of Harlem. And, Arthur Mitchell really had a thing for us youngsters who were drummers, musicians. He kept us alive. We had our own little studio. We had a loft space. We really had it really, 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 really good. When you don't realize how good you got it, it's on. You're like, damn, we really had it good. And we had the instrument, we had xylophones, we had all that stuff in the room, stuff to work on. What they didn't give us was enough instructional stuff. We didn't have it wasn't as intense as it could have been or should have been. But they were focusing on dance, and you guys go over there and make noise. So we did. We made noise, and usually the time when we had performances with the company or something to that effect, that was our hope and a dream. But that wasn't what's the motivation for us being there. Just get the kids off the street, boom. But I didn't really come off the street. I came searching for it. We did that. So who walks into the room? Abiodun with Obar. Obar is about 4 years old. You met Obar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know where he's at now, Mr. Big Time Lawyer. And he was 4 years old at the time. So he brought Obar in and he said, look, I want you to teach me. I said, you have your... I was like, just like everybody else, genuflecting, And he's like, look, I'm just here to just teach. I want to give my son some culture, some music, some drumming, some culture. That's what he came into. So that's how our relationship began with Abiodun and myself. From that point, we had some gigs together on occasion. He'll come and see his kid perform. Oba would perform with us with the group. We give him a bell or something. We had these open houses that we always do performances on. So that's how it began. And then I think with Tyrone Jefferson, we did a recording, which actually was like one of the major recordings for me because it was like I did the whole album.
What was that called?
Tyrone Jefferson Connections, I think it was called Connections.
And you were saying you did the whole recording.
I did a lot of the percussion stuff. I mean, there was some tracks that other people had performed on. And, I didn't know what to charge him, blah, 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 blah. He said, look, you got to trust me. I got to earn your trust, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, we go for it. And even to this day, sometimes you listen to earlier recordings and say, wow, I wish I could know what I knew now and then, But I still listen to it, and I still enjoy listening to it. So that's the big. I was really trying to get into the mainstream of stuff. So that became a thing for me. But that's how and in fact, there is a video, I do have a copy of it somewhere. Or in fact, it's somebody on my feed in Facebook where he did a recording of the title track, and Doom is actually doing the poetry on that.
What was it like playing at the Apollo Theater for you? Somebody born and bred in Harlem. So many great things went down there.
I mean, I played there a few times, and I never did like the amateur hour. Right?
You didn't have to do the amateur hour.
I didn't do the amateur hour. So it wasn't like that for me. We lost a few gigs. You think maybe a week or two, a month. And then after a while, and then it's like, oh, what about a lifestyle? As performing artists, it's always about recreating and always preparing yourself for those eventual rainy days. So.
Also, right now, as I feel always is so important for people that do what we do, who do protests, who do protest music, who are delivering messages that need to get out there. I mean, that's why we're doing Zoom and we are continuing with the podcast, because we can't do it live, and it is so important to do it live. It's just important that our message is not going to stop being, we're going to continue to do the message. Plus, they can go back and look at our whole history. It's not like we're sitting on nothing here. They can go back and review. Right now, actually, people should go back and look at the history of the last poets and how, even from the very beginning of what they were saying, it is maybe even more pertinent now, because this is the shit that needs to be said. That's
what kept me moving with them, and this was like the motivation. That first album seemed to be the one that everyone is romanced by, For me, it was a message from different angles of different points of view. You had Islam, you had the Yoruba, you had all of this. Not that it was pronounced in the culture, but by the names, you knew there were different people and different cultures. That and the message, we're still in the same message. I think now, the revolution has gotten to a point where people are being a little more literate to what's going on. But you have another generation that is solely blinded by the fact that they want to maintain their supremacy, and that's going to jeopardize their way of life. With John Lewis passing, it's almost like he made it this far. It's like, now I'm passing the baton. It's kind of fitting. It's almost perfect in a way that his leaving, because especially at a time when they need to reevaluate what they're going to do with the unemployment and blah, blah, blah. And these people are saying, well, you can find something else to do, like go and eat cake. What are you talking about? Get something else to do, something else. It's like, there is nothing else.
There's nothing, exactly. It's ridiculous.
People that are born with a silver stick up their ass have no idea what it's like to live at the levels of struggle that so many people in this country, richest country in the world, not by our standards. Right. We're not the rich ones. It's such a small percentage by their statistics when they say it could be 27 to 30 million people unemployed. That's a low figure, but that they don't want to help people. What happens? The homeless situation in this country is worse than anywhere other than a third world country. And we know that a lot of the homeless are vets, people that miss one rent check. Now what's going to happen? We got 23 million people on the streets. We all going to squat at the White House? Then put a fence up. We can't do it.
Oh, he put the fence up.
Exactly. No one thought that the wall that he was promising was going to be the one around the White House because he was afraid of his own people. See, that's the big thing. With the class divide, you have the richest people in the world here. What's the average worth of someone? You have 20 people in the room and you have one billionaire in the room. The average is a little skewed at that point. It doesn't represent the actual extreme wealth.
This is a kind of rude metaphor. We know the history of slavery in this country, but we don't know it acutely enough, especially those of us that don't have grandfathers, great-grandfathers, et cetera, that have a history of being imported here at the white man's demand to build this fucking country. But what they have done now is that black people are not only still enslaved by the lack of even food, nutrition, the right kind of education, the possibilities, being still warehoused in projects that are just gulags. But they have managed to successfully enslave a lot of the white population by making them slave labor wage earners, when $15, which is supposed to be high, ain't giving nobody a good standard of fucking life. So when they stop beating us, except for all the black, brown, and everyone else that the men put in prison, all right, we're not getting whipped. We are still being beaten down. So they have succeeded in not only enslaving one population, but pretty much anybody that is not them is being enslaved by a wage that is not working for anyone. Start right there.
It's like most pyramid schemes. This is a pyramid scheme. You got the people on top making the money and they're recycling the money, but then it's down. You look at the bottom pyramid, it's running out.
And there is no trickle down.
I mean, how many cars, how many houses can how big the house has to be?
Well, they're mentally ill. They're mentally ill. We stigmatize all mental imbalances, all addictions, whether it's drugs, gambling, sex. We stigmatize all of them
except for greed.
Except for greed. We don't stigmatize it. We celebrate. We encourage it. It's one of these things. We're a social species, and any kind of, you want to step outside the pack and you want to make some waves, there's going to be collateral damage, even if the intentions are good somewhere. And the collateral damage with these billionaires.
Excuse me, I'm going to step
so
in.
Insane.
When the richest man in the world is making $188,000 a second and is paying workers $15 an hour, something is very wrong. It has not changed with this picture. Like I say, is this going to change? Not so sure. Why do we rebel? Because we have to. How do we rebel? With art. And I'm not on that grid. You're not on that grid. We are lucky to have been able to actually cut out our own culture of rebellion and without being imprisoned yet, either of us, I don't think.
Right.
I want to go back to that question, Babatunde. It's interesting when people do tourism and say the third world, and I always hear this thing like, oh, the everyday celebration of life, we should bring that more into our reality. And I always respond to that with like, well, the reason why musicians and artists party all the time is because we are 1 inch from disaster all the fucking time with our economically. So of course we're celebrating our lives.
How did you begin teaching people? Because I think it is such a valid and necessary form of collaborative expression to kind of pass on, encourage people. I mean, I just occasionally teach workshops. It's so important.
For me, it was about sharing the culture, making sure that I was seeking it out, looking for it. So I appreciate the value of it. And I want to share that, I want my students primarily, some of the stuff I'm doing with them now is just try to keep in touch with them and get them motivated. Sean Kelly, he's like a prime example. I mean, like when I started teaching Sean, he's about 11.
Wow.
Sean speaks very highly of you as an incredible mentor his whole life, actually.
You could be doing percussive lessons on Zoom now. I mean, that is the beauty of Zoom.
I have been doing that. I've been intending to do that. So.
I mean, of course, it's better in person, but I mean, this is all we got right now.
Yeah, eventually I'm going to have to reevaluate my space in terms of drums and put drum set and all that kind of stuff up in the space. So do that. Hopefully, if we can get back in the building, we can do it from the building, and I could utilize some of the materials there. If not, I'll have to do it here. But that's what I've been doing with the teaching.
Baba, I wrote a cookbook, but I just have to ask you, because I know you must cook, because I know you eat. What would be your perfect meal if we were having a date? Just saying.
Let's say, I like fish, of course.
Me too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fish, lobster, little crab cake.
Oh, quick, crab cakes? Hang on.
Cake,
now you're trying to seduce me. I love it.
Macaroni and cheese, some collard greens, some black-eyed peas.
Collard greens, which are delicious, of all the greens they are, take the longest to cook. You have to cook those things down. You got to cook
them.
No,
not necessarily.
Well, if you want them all like that, if you want them all buttery. But do you make collard greens? You can't even get them around this area.
In a can?
Yeah, I don't
yes,
really
you
cook
can.
that. I don't cook my greens that long. I try and steam. My mother taught me how to steam them.
That's right.
And then you steam them, they come out not too, I don't like my vegetables too soft.
No, you like them a bit crunchy. Anyway, we're going to have some crab cakes. We're going to have some lobster tails.
Is your family Southern?
Southern, yes, indeed. South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay. Did you still have family down there?
Yeah, I still have family down there. In Sumter, South Carolina.
Sumter, one of my best friends is right from Sumter, David Earl Budden. What are some of the issues with the younger generation, or positives and negatives, in terms of just the ones you agree with politically, socially, artistically, and some of the things, because you're a little wiser, a little older, that you have some issues with?
There's a lot of superficialism that's going on, but a lot of, also maybe I'm becoming an old phobia, I guess, in some respects. Some of the stuff that the kids are, they're being so over overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed by what?
By sex and
wait, that wasn't the case before?
Well, it was always there. I mean, like, there was a time I remember the old songs. What's his name? Tom Bell, that wrote so many of these old slow jams, and and it was a more romantic time. Now it's more glitter. What you can do for me. What you can buy me,
basically me is what you're talking about.
A lot of the young kids that I'm working with, they don't have that attitude, but a lot of the ones who are around, they have.
The superficiality also might come as a rebellion against having parents that might have been deeper.
That's a way of looking at it, but not. I think in most cases, it's just that the TV, the
downside of the immediacy of the internet.
We're looking at stuff, and we'll Kanye. You see this. You see the Kim Kardashians. You see the lifestyles on these shows that they start programming your mind to think that's part of success.
The celebrity of being a celebrity.
But now hip hop and love, hip hop and it creates this is hitting the masses full time. So they got to wear the glow, they got to have their teeth all done up, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of, you're competing out there for that attention, and you can't get it. So now you go into crime to try to make that happen.
This is the problem.
It's the makeup, the eyes, the lashes.
It's what you look like, not what you've done.
That's kind of like, if you take all that stuff off, you say, who are you? You know what I mean?
I do.
It's not natural. It's not so. It's kind of unnatural.
Most people aren't brave enough to be themselves, unfortunately.
It's just that the media itself is propelling that ideology. It's just like
consumerism. Babatunde, we got just a couple of minutes here. We're closing. Any words of wisdom to not just the youth, to the world in a very short?
Love yourself, man. Love yourself. Love people around you. It may not be here for long.
You got to appreciate beauty. This is what I always tell people, is that there is so much beauty in this world that we sometimes can't see it because all we're presented on the TV or on the internet is the negative side of that. And if you don't appreciate beauty, you're ripping yourself off. You got to start there. You said love yourself, love other people, and find the beauty in things because otherwise they win.
Thank you so much. Great seeing you.
We'll be in touch soon. We're going to be Zooming each other, okay?
Oh.
Promise.
Okay, now. All right, now.
See you soon. Thank you so much.